As we progress to the latest developments in wardrobe, let's review some of the ideas we've talked about with architecture influencing wardrobe. Here we have a Gothic arch, and we talked earlier about how these Gothic arches influenced wardrobe because they influenced the way painters saw the body and the way people dressed the body. So that these Gothic arches here in this uh, church, very much like the woman Hans Memling painted, she had a figure like a Gothic arch. Now, did she really have a figure? Probably not, but it was the way the garments were going to be draped over that figure that made the painter paint the figure that way. So the Gothic arch influenced the costume, which influenced the way they saw the body. And here we have that influence, where it's the high bodice, flat breast, the pouched out stomach. Not necessarily the fact they were all pregnant. That's just the way the wardrobe was uh, seen in those days as being the most in thing, most stylistic. So nowadays, when we shoot our movies, we make sure we ape that stylistic trend to get us back in that period. And if we look at the ideas of Venus, and if we look at that late Renaissance vision of the birth of Venus, Botticelli, here we see that she's a little Baroque. Her arm isn't really as long as that. It's a little extended, a little Mannerist. But about that, the way her body is formed and filled out, whether it's the flying symbolic figures or herself, very much different from the Venus we see nowadays. And this would be Ursula Andress coming out of the water in Doctor No, and we see her as a modern Venus, very much like the architecture, not Gothic, but very military and missile-like and space exploration more than the way we dress our Jane Fondas and Barbarella. So we see that the dominant mode of architecture in this time would be that very aggressive space-like look, which we saw whether it was in Venus or we saw in our haute couture in upper classes. And so when you look at architecture like this, we think, okay, well, this is the 80s, and this is thrusting architecture, very much seen in the movies where, okay, we have this, triangular sweater pooched down, this flash dance look. This triangular mirrored look influences the way we dress, but not as much as the mall influenced the 80s look. We dressed as if the dominant architecture of our time was the mall. So we dressed in a way that was very vibrant, easy to walk around the mall, but very colorful. And so this is what determined the way we look. And this is why we get these crazy colors in the 80s. It's the mall look where we mismatch different, clothing. It's as if we stopped in 12 different stores in the mall and put them all together. That's basically what I call the mall look. And this is the 80s coming to be. And this is just reflecting the fact that here you are. This abundance of different wardrobe to pick from. You clash it, throw it together, and you have that 80s style. And then you have the people rebelling against that 80s style here. And what they'll do is they'll come up with a different hairstyle and a different look. With the punks being angry about coming out of the inner city, their look is going to be maybe an aggressive mohawk look and a very working class garment. And so it's like the studded belt, the mohawk, the jeans. It's a inner city look that's fighting against this upper class overjeweled Egyptian look, the Chanel look. And their view is that this ostentatious overabundance of wealth is just vomiting it forth more than anybody can stand. And so they come from a world where they see the future like this, with robots in a destroyed mall. And so the look changes in the 80s to reflect that political consciousness. So the hair becomes more disarrayed, the jewelry, a parody of the fancy jewelry. And we get Madonna here in her parody of all sorts of costumes, whether it's her jerkin jacket, it's her slip underneath, or it's the fake jewelry. And Arquette standing next to her has got the same thing. It's a cheap throw-on jewelry with the coats, the baggy coats, the baggy dress here, and pretty in pink. And our architecture suddenly takes a little swerving kind of. It's like the modern city has kind of crushed us and warped us and plasticized us, and the colors are very acrylic and kid-like. And so between that and the form of really swerving, crazy textiles and industrial supplies come up with their apogee in Spice Girls. And here's the Spice Girls, and what they're doing is that they reflect all this with latex, and they're super streamlined, reflective, mylar type of latex outfits, like this woman here in her Star Trek latex. So the latex look came in the 90s and was reflective and shiny, just like the buildings were, and somewhat warped in that vision. And the men and the women also had the leather look, the fake leather. So it's all the power suit, the Marvel comic power suit. And if you're going to have the latex, leather, plastic suit, it's almost like we're all fighting a future war, and we're, weathering ourselves against it with this tight, reflective fabric. Very aggressive looking style, like the building here. So that even the undergarments or the swimming garments will be plasticized, metallic looking, and aggressive in the late 80s and early 90s, where our architecture is almost garish and gaudy in its over bling-like look. Look at the cars. I mean, we can say this is the ultimate extension of car fetishism and bejeweled status anxiety that we got with the gangsters now. The gangsters, they're no longer doing their mohawks and their dungarees. They're out there with bling, showing that they can make the money illegally and come up with the wild diamond gold bling that is famous in the J-Lo and her glasses here. So it's gangster bling becomes part of the 90s look to offset the elegant noir look of the upper classes, whose sleek nightgown look is going to the other extension of overabundance of wealth. So we have very flowing, sleek lines and roughs on our ankles if we're going to do our skateboard, and pumps. The pumps becoming more exaggerated, more crazy to show that stylistic look of late 20th century. And then we have the diaphanous, see-through kind of fabric that becomes predominant. And then with 9/11, things change, and so actually styles change to show the nature of punishment and conflict, the blacks, the forbidding looks, the beat up look, the victim look, the extremely aggressive bomb look of the architecture, reflecting that. And here, if we're going to be flaunting our furs, it's basically flaunting them with nothing else, and so it's stripped down. Something's missing. Something's been robbed. Something's aggressive, and our looks of fabric. It's like it's just the fabric and the body, nothing else. Nothing really complicated. It's like parts of the fabric. It's Lady Godiva's got a little fabric here, just the bottom part of the fabric. So we merge into finally the digital age and the post-millennial look. And Mary Katzenbachus, she's this designer, I think probably the predominant designer of our time, and she's taking digital prints and putting them on fabrics that give us this illusion. It's hard to tell what the pattern is, but it's very dynamic, very colorful. So digital prints are now in, and we can have this moire look in the center, or we can have this kind of Barreau look on the side. And it's the mixture of prints and swashes of color that we can digitally design outfits that are dynamic and flowing and almost futuristic, and reflecting the highly colorized cities that we now have in our reflective glass, that are the jewels of our architecture. And so we have the swirl of color, the clash and crazy combinations of color that are like the buildings that we have in our postmodern architecture. It doesn't matter if we're advertising McDonald's or just doing a retro 70s look. It's the acrylic, crazy chemical colors that predominate, and it's the digital patterns that give us all sorts of stylistic, elegant looks, and we can bleed colors in, and we can experiment. It's endless possibilities with fabric. Just like the buildings, we're starting to create curvature and angles and depth and interest just by the creation that we can come up with our computer-assisted design. We can also reflect our museums, like the Walt Disney Center here, the concert center and its gold burnished bronze look, we can have that dress look that gold burnished bronze, and give us that feeling of statuesque, somewhat Egyptian, somewhat postmodern. Very much the gold statue come to life, and the sleek, bending, warped, reflective lines of our architecture, very much whether it's that way or with the blocky sense, whether it's nothing smooth lines like we have in the 20s and the 40s where the skyscrapers are just smooth rectangles. Here we have a rectangle bulging off another square, very much like the midriff look that came in the 90s. And suddenly, in the early 20 millennial period, we got that. It's very much like that, and of course, it's very much like the muffin top, right? Which would be reflection of that architecture, if you will, where things are kind of overlapping and spilling out, and giving us what they call here the kind of globular look here, reflected in the architecture. Who knows what came first? And then the grunge style, reflecting that early 80s mall style, only now with more manufactured fabrics and designs, so that we have, movies where, we have the future being a kind of a grunge future, right? Where we've got, different dresses combining with different hairdos. Like if she's got a mini skirt, she's got a pompadour 18th century hairdo, and he's got the cowboy look with the military look. And then if we combine that with this explosion of all this chemically derived color that is just bursting in different hues, we've got the period that we can play now, and I think in this postmodern sense, this millennial sense, where we can go from colors to understated. So the upper class would say, if the lower class is going colorful, we're going to go understated. So that the way of separating ourselves from style is huge. And then you can combine them, saying, okay, if we're going to be colorful, we're going to do it in a way so that it shows a certain style and wealth, and reflecting our crazily lit cities now. I think our wardrobe reflects us these days in the crazy match of colors. And we are in the period of bursting reflective color. And even in our malls here, we can see just walking in, it used to be a nondescript place, which now has to have that mixture of color that we have. And then on the other side, if we don't, we're going to have the people rebelling against that. So it's going to be the drab, at ease look. This is kind of like almost a post-slum look, only the expensive fabric showing the difference. And so we've got that grunge kind of combo look here, where the stars are saying, okay, if you're going to objectify me in some elegance, I'll fight against that. And that becomes a style statement. And then people imitate that. And so as you see the stars, how they dress is what kind of movie we're looking at. And we'll be talking about that in a minute. But right now, it's like almost this it's like hallucinating color. It's like this guy's pants, for instance, just riding up the spectrum. Everybody's a rainbow, just like the towns are a rainbow. And the fabrics are cut with the new machinery so that they slash and they swirl, and they've got all the vectors. And looking into the future, it's probably going to be somewhere between Mary's Kontrastus's look of the digital pattern, and then kind of down urban look of kind of an expensive working class look, combined or clashed or conflicting, as to give us our choices in the future. So it'll be the urban gangster versus the digitally patterned upper class.